and walk out into the community, do we live like Jesus is coming soon? Are you catching what I'm talking about here? It's easier to think about it, to yeah, it's happening. A little harder to align that kind of thinking with the way that we're living in the world around us, right? It's a little harder to line those two. And so what I wanted to do was just talk a little bit about that. But before I did, I think the last time I came, I shared a little illustration with you involving some blocks. So what I want to do is I want to test and see how good you paid attention last time I came. So I've got my little table here, and I'm going to put my blocks on this chair, these chairs, and I want to see how many of you remember what the green block represented. Remember last time I came? See, I'm going to talk about discipleship today. This is a good discipleship exercise here. So we've got a green block, we've got 2 yellow blocks, and if you don't think I used these blocks last time I came, now is the time to say something before I get them all out. Okay. 3. All right. Does that ring a bell? Do you remember seeing those blocks last time I came? You don't? You don't remember me coming? Okay. All right. Well, let me do this. Let me say, if you weren't here, or if I failed to bring the blocks. All right. The green block. How many blocks are there altogether? 10. You can take the world's population and divide up into groups of... Yeah, that's what happens. All right. So you can take the world's population, divide the world's population up into groups of 10%. Okay? So you've got groups of 10%. And if you did that, and your rounded figures off, you discover that about 10% of the world's population are practicing Christians. How much? About 10%. This is an easy demonstration because we're just using 10% blocks, right? It's actually like 11% or 11.5% or something like that. But rounded off to 10%. Got 10% practicing Christians and about 20% Christians in name only. If you ask them, are you a Christian? They're going to say yes. But if you actually watch where they're living, you would have no idea that they're Christians. Because they don't live like, they don't read the Bible, they don't go to church, they don't pray on a regular basis. You would never know that they're Christians, other than if you ask them, they'll say, oh yes, of course, who wouldn't want to be a Christian? All right, so you've got those people. And then over here, you've got about 30% of the world's population, and actually I should put these over here, because this 30%, they're not Christians, but they live in the same communities as Christians. They're in your neighborhood. They're not a Christian. If they're in your neighborhood, they're here. Okay? And the interesting thing is about a third of these know a Christian. The other 2/3 don't. Only about a third of them actually knows a Christian. Now, we don't know if they know these guys or if they know these guys, right? But about a third of these people living in Christian communities, or same communities as Christians, and a third of them know a Christian. Okay, so then we come over here to this group. And who does this group represent? They're the people that are not Christians, right? And do they live in the same communities as Christians? No. They don't have any Christians living in their communities. So do they know any Christians? No, they don't. So if they're going to learn about Christianity, what has to happen? Somebody's going to move. Either they're going to move over here and learn about Christians if Christians actually talk to them. Okay. Quite often you have foreigners come over. We've got this weird, people. I don't know who they are. They came from some foreign country. We don't usually associate with them, right? So if they can move over here, if the Christians will actually go talk to them, they can meet a Christian and learn about Christianity that way. But if they don't move, then what else has to happen? Or can happen? You have some of these people can actually what? Move over here. Okay? Now for every 140 pastors, Bible teachers, chaplains, for every 140 paid Bible workers that work over here, one goes to work over here. Okay? For every 140 that work over here, one of them works over here. So we like to say Jesus is coming. His coming is just around the corner. We have this clock. It says, it's almost 12 o'clock. When it hits 12, Jesus is coming. And so every year we add it up a little bit more, and pretty soon we're going to be like half seconds. We're just wanting to build this picture, this idea that we're almost there. And at the same time we're doing that, about 40% of the world's population don't even know who Jesus is, never heard of Christ, no Christians in the neighborhood, no Bibles in their language. Like they're just waiting, trying to figure out. They don't know. And I've met people. I talked to a guy one time, and he didn't have numbers, in his language. Well, he had two numbers. He had 1 and 2. They didn't have a number beyond that. So I was chatting with him, and he and a bunch of people in his community were wondering about this Christianity thing. They'd heard a bit and piece here and there. So I spent some time in the afternoon talking to him about it. And as I did, we began walking through the timeline from creation, time when Christ was here, moving on to time that where we are now. And as I mentioned, Jesus died to pay for our sins and to overcome the power of demons, and to free us from that. And he'll be coming soon and take us to heaven. And then because they didn't use numbers, I couldn't say that happened in 2,000 years ago. They wouldn't understand that. So I calculated back as well as 80 generations ago, like you and your dad, and trying to figure out a way to say 80 generations. Like you could see these slats on the ceiling. They had slats like that on their floor. So I said, okay, so that's you and your dad and your dad's dad, and worked my way through 80 of them. That's where creation took place, and that's where the flood took place, and that's where Jesus, came and died. But I went to the 80 generations from his death all the way over to where we were, and I said that's generations of Christians have been trying to reach all the world, all those generations. And he just started wailing, crying, just his whole body was shaking. He was just traumatized by that. And I was just curious. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That'd be about 20. That'd be about 40. So 80 would be, if you started there, 80 would be all the way up there and down in here somewhere. Okay, so that'd be about 80. And he was just thinking, all those generations knew about Jesus. All those generations knew that Jesus is coming soon. All those generations knew about, that Jesus overcame the devil, and we don't have to be subject to demons. We don't have to be worrying about witchcraft and charms and sorcery, and we don't have to have demons, making us sick and all the curses, and we don't have to. He would just like he couldn't believe all those generations knew all that, and at the same time his people kept dying and dying and dying and dying, living in fear and worrying and killing each other and eating each other and go. He's like, all you people knew. He was just dumbfounded. He's like, why didn't anybody come tell us? Like all of you guys knew. Generation after generation, all of you knew. Why didn't anybody come tell me? Why? He just upset. Why? And the challenge of being here is you don't know what you're missing. You don't know. Like, how do you know? There are no Christians there. There's nothing there to inform you, so you don't know. And the longer we wait, the worse it's going to be. What if it's 90 generations or 100 generations? People find out, you guys knew for 100 generations? What are they going to say? Oh, sorry, I was going to tell you, but I had this great TV program on it. I didn't want to turn it off, Or I was going to tell you, but, I could have sent some money and we could send a missionary over there, but, I was building a new, remodeling my kitchen. Or I was, all the things we could come up with, reasons why we didn't doing anything about it. It's pretty easy to come up with excuses if you really want to do something. You can also come up with excuses to do something, right? You can say, well, these guys are suffering. I'm going to tell them. That's why I'm not going to eat pizza tonight. Or that's why I'm not going to. We can find excuses to help these people if we really, that's going to fall again. Yeah. So Adventist Friendship Missions, we're an organization that says, look, we want to prioritize these people. We want to prioritize them. We want to send missionaries over there. We want to do everything we possibly can to make sure that this doesn't go another generation, and another one, and without these people finding out. We want to make sure that we make Christianity available. Not just Christianity, but let's look at these texts here. I'm going to move this. All right. So if you have your Bible, I want to read something with you. So we're reading the two our two scripture readings. So Matthew 24, we'll start with that one first. Actually, let's do the Matthew 28 first, and we'll come back to Matthew 24. Matthew 28. So this says here, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. So all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Go therefore and make what? Disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and then doing what? Teaching them to observe or practice or put into to obey all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. All right, so that's the first verse. Now we'll read a couple chapters back, Matthew 24. I hope when I get down from this pulpit, you'll think to yourself, I never understood those verses before. I hope that's what's going to happen. We'll see. Verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. All right. So here's one of the things that we don't usually understand. And that has to do with discipleship. What is a disciple? A follower. Okay, so historically we have a number of examples of disciples. For instance, we have Socrates. So Socrates was a teacher, and I kind of like the story of Socrates. It's kind of funny because Socrates was kind of like Jesus in a couple of ways. Socrates never actually wrote anything. He didn't write a book. The only way we know Socrates existed was because he had disciples. There's 4 of them who wrote about him. Now, the challenge with these 4 disciples is that all 4 of them disagreed about what Socrates taught. And all 4 of them disagreed about who Socrates was. One said, oh, he was a soldier. One said, no, he refused to work. Another said, no, he's a mason. So they gave different pictures of who his background was, right? So was Socrates a real figure? Or was he just like a figment of their imagination? They just cooked this thing up together. People argue about that. few people. Most people simply assume that Socrates existed, and they use Plato, which is one of his disciples. They say, well, we'll just take his writings and we'll base our beliefs about Socrates on Plato's writings. So Plato gets to, not Play-Doh, but Plato. He gets to paint the picture for us of who Socrates was, right? So then all four of these guys went on to create universities, like schools of learning, and they taught what Socrates taught them, but they all four taught something different. All right, so then Plato goes on, and Plato also, he becomes a master teacher, and he has a disciple. Dad, can you tell us who his disciple was? Aristotle. So those of you who know Aristotle was a disciple of Plato. So who was a disciple of Aristotle? Or a student of Aristotle? His name is Alexander the... There you go. So you guys are historians too. I'm happy to hear that. All right. So the fascinating thing about discipleship is you have a master teacher, and then you have a disciple, and the disciple's job is to follow the master teacher around and learn from him. To follow him around and learn from him. And if you take your picture of discipleship only from the four Gospels, because we have four what? Disciples writing, right? Two of them were actually disciples who followed him around. Mark was a little younger, so maybe he wasn't like the official disciple. He still followed Jesus around and learned from him. And then you have who? Luke. And who is Luke? He's like Plato. He's a disciple of one of the disciples. Does that make sense, right? And so he writes his story. And he learns from the other disciples and writes his story. In fact, you've got like 6 or 8, 9, I think around 6 or 8 chapters in Luke full of information that you don't find in Matthew or Mark or John, right? So Luke has got quite a bit of material that he learned from doing all of his research that the others don't have in there. And so we have a disciple and a teacher. And so Luke is a disciple of Jesus, but maybe he never even knew Jesus. Yeah, so he didn't actually know him personally, but he's still his what? His disciple. He's learning from other what? And that's the whole point. So if I'm the young man, what's your name? Justin, could you help me out? Yeah, you just put your Bible down and just come over here for a second. You can stand there right here. Okay, so my job, if I'm the master teacher, which I'm not, but if I was the master teacher, then Justin, he would follow me around. And when I started talking, he would what? He's ready to take notes. Like he wants to learn everything. But not just what I say, but he wants to pick up my philosophy. So he's taking all my teachings, and then he says, no, wait a second. I thought you said, and he's trying to figure out not just my teaching, but my philosophy, how I think. He wants to understand how I see the world around me, how it makes sense to me. He wants to pick that up. And half of what he does to pick that up is to watch what I'm actually doing. As you have a flower. He's going to watch me give her a flower and say, okay, he must care about women, right? Or mothers. Like he's going to try to catch how I'm thinking, not just from what I teach, but from what I do. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's what a disciple does. He follows the master teacher around. He's always taking notes, what he's saying, what he's doing, trying to get a picture of his philosophy, how he interacts with other people. If someone asks me a question, how would I answer that question? Would I answer it by telling a story, by telling a parable, by being critical, by attacking? He wants to figure out, how do I teach? Right? How do I teach? So it's not just what I'm teaching, but how I am teaching. Does that make sense? Yeah. So he's trying to pick up my whole way of thinking and engaging the world around me. He wants to pick all that up. Thank you, Justin. Yeah. He didn't do much. He just stood there. Okay. There you go. All right. So master teacher, he has to remember his job is not simply to speak, Like I'm in a pulpit now. What am I doing? I'm speaking, right? And you may want to just not listen to this next little bit here. Yeah, so so the master teacher, he speaks one thing, but the disciple wants to make sure or wants to see if what he's living is in line with what he's speaking. If it's not, then he's not a master teacher, and there's no reason to follow him, right? But if he is, then hey, it's worth what? Following him. Yeah? Because you can learn from watching him, right? And so then you have this. So then you have the four critical elements of discipleship. One, you've got this master teacher who's actually living his teaching. His whole life is his classroom, lecture, right? And then the disciples, they're following that to try to, because every day is a new classroom. No matter where you are, you're in the class and you're learning from that master teacher. What his philosophy is, what he's thinking, how he teaches, how he engages the world around him. He's always watching to pick up on all that, right? So you have that relationship of the master teacher and the disciple just working together every day. You've got that one element. That's the first element of discipleship. The second one is you have the master teacher's teaching. And the student wants to know, okay, what is it? And he's constantly trying to pick up on that teaching. The third element is the student, the disciple, Justin, not only does he listen to what I'm teaching, he commits himself to putting into practice. Because the master teacher, he's not a master teacher if he doesn't actually live what he's teaching, right? And you're not a disciple unless you what? Live what he's teaching too. On both sides, you've got this concept of putting into practice what you're learning. The master teacher has to do that, and so does the student. And what's the third thing, or the fourth thing? So you've got this follower-master-teacher relationship, the teachings of the master teacher, putting the teachings into practice. And the fourth one is the disciple becomes an extension of the master teacher in the community. He becomes another what? Another teacher. His job is to share. And share what he's learning, encourage other people to what? Put the teaching into practice, and to also be followers of the master teacher. Does that make sense? And even today, people claim to be disciples of Socrates. So many years later, they say, oh yeah, he's the father of modern philosophy. Like, we're his disciples still. Like, how many years later, back in the days of the Greeks? Yeah, they still claim to be disciples of Socrates. And so here's the fascinating thing for me. If you read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those books are nothing short of discipleship handbooks. They said, this is what Jesus taught. This is how he lived. This is what he did. This is how he taught people. It's not just what he taught, but how he taught. Right? This is who he was and why we decided to be disciples of him. This is why. He actually lived what he was talking about. It's his philosophy, how he was thinking. Right? This is all in there. And then he'd say things fascinating like Matthew 7. Matthew 7. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, this is Matthew 7, 24 and 25. Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I'll liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. And those that hear these sayings of mine and does not do them, he's not a disciple. And his house is going to fall. So you constantly, as you read through here, you keep verse 21. Not everybody who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. So you have this concept of hearing and doing. That's all discipleship language. The whole books are full of discipleship language, including the ones we were reading about a few minutes ago. And I want to point those out to you because it's easy to, if you don't understand this whole concept of discipleship, it's easy to read this and not pick up on it. So Matthew 24:14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world as a witness. That word witness, martyrion, Greek. I'm not a Greek. I don't know Greek. All I know is I looked it up and I thought that was interesting. The word martyrion, we translate it as witness. It actually means, my notes here. Yeah, it means it's not just a witness. The term means being a witness. Like to be a witness, right? So you have Justin, can you come here, please? I know your name now, so you're in trouble. Okay, so here we have Justin, and you're preaching. This is the world out there. You're preaching the world, right? Can you say Jesus loves you, at least as an example here? There you go. He's preaching. All right, so and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached. He just preached it. Preached in all the world as and being a witness. He's preaching as being a witness. When it says being a witness, what does that assume? He acts it out. The whole concept of discipleship is you're speaking and you're doing it. You're speaking and doing it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So he's saying, yeah, he's speaking and he's also being it. Yeah, being it. Thank you, Justin. If I ask you again, you're going to get upset? Okay, good. All right, so he's speaking and doing, and this gospel of the kingdom we preach in all the world as being a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. So that kind of says that the world needs living witnesses, living disciples. Not just saying, well, we need to send the gospel over there, so we'll print up a bunch of Bibles and put them in a box and ship them over there. That helps. But what Christ is asking for is what? Living witness. He wants people. He wants people. And now watch this one. This is the most just amazing. I love this one. This is Matthew 28. Matthew 28. And the 11, it's the 6th verse 16. The 11 disciples went away into Galilee to the mountains which Jesus had appointed for them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. So you have this picture. I'm not going to get into that. That'll be an interesting conversation, but we're not going to go there. Verse 18. But Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been what? Given to me in where? So one of the things you want to do if you're going to be a follower, you want to know, who is this person that I am following? Is it worthwhile for me to give up my lifestyle or whatever and what? And follow him around. So who is this guy? And what does Jesus say here? I'm actually the boss. like not just the master teacher, like the university. It's right there, man. Right there. Like I am, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Like I am the boss. Go therefore and what? Okay, my Bible. This I have the new King James. It says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations." So make what? What's a disciple? A follower and a doer and a learner. He's going to listen to. How many times did Jesus say, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear"? He's saying, listen to this, and then what? Do it. That concept of hearing is not just to the ears, but ears and behavior. He's saying, really listen. If he said listen, he's saying do it. Yeah. So go make disciples, those that follow the master teacher, listen to what he's teaching, put it into practice, and share it with other people, right? You got to do that. So go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them or immersing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then what do we have? Teaching them to observe or obey. So we have is not just teaching them, but what? Obeying too, right? You've got the two together. So there you have the one, who Jesus is, why we're following Him. Two, we've got His teachings. Next we have the observing, putting into practice, right? And then you're going and making disciples of all the nations. That's also the step number 4 is sharing. You've got all 4 elements of discipleship embedded in that Great Commission. Are you tracking with me? All 4 elements of discipleship are embedded in that statement. Christ truly is saying, listen, I'm serious about this. Go and make disciples. You got to do that. You have to be really committed to me. If you're not committed, you're not a disciple. You got to study my teachings because you're going to share them with other people too. You're also going to put those teachings into practice. If you're not studying my teachings, you're not a disciple. If you're not sharing with other people, you're not a disciple. If you're not practicing what you're reading, then you're not a disciple. And you're not. Because that's what disciples do. And He says, listen, by the way, I want you to go and make disciples of all the nations. All the nations. And then He finishes by saying, Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. In other words, that disciple master-teacher relationship is never going to end. He starts off by saying, it's worthwhile for you to follow me. And He finishes by saying, oh, by the way, I'll always be with you. This is a disciple-making commission here. I mean, it truly is. He uses the term make disciples, but the whole thing is pitched around that concept of being a disciple and having a master teacher. We often read that and say, yeah, I'm waiting for Jesus to come. And He's saying, no, if you're waiting for Jesus to come and you're really a disciple, you're going to be busy. You're going to be busy. My concern is that far too often we've taken that concept of discipleship and we've set it aside in place of church membership. Where you become a church member and you sit down in the pew, and who's the one that's active? It's the head elder and the preacher and like the song lead. Like they have parts to play that most of the members are passive. They sit in the pew and watch what's taking place. But that's not what disciples do. Disciples are busy. Disciples are busy. They're always busy. And what I want to say is I really feel we need to go back to this biblical model of discipleship and really ask some serious questions. Are we truly disciples? Are we truly disciples? Are we truly disciples? We have to ask ourselves that question. Do you realize that a little over 100 years ago, the world's population was about 35% Christian? 100 years ago, about 35% Christian. You know what the percentage is right now? It's between 31 and 32%. The percentage-wise, there's more non-Christians today than there was 100 years ago. Percentage-wise, number-wise, it's through the roof. Because there's probably more non-believers in the world today than there was total Earth's population 100 years ago. So the challenge we have is, well, how are we going to address these people? Are we going to send 100 missionaries over there? How are we going to get enough money to send 100 missionaries over there? You know, the GC president 100 years ago, he bemoaned the fact I forget what the figures were now. I'd have to go back. Maybe I shouldn't say this. But I don't remember the numbers. But he was bemoaning the fact that we had, I think it was 700 pastors in the United States. We were only sending, I think, 150 or whatever it was. He's bemoaning the fact that we were only sending so many missionaries abroad when we have hundreds of pastors here in the States. What if he was alive today and he would say, man, this is the figure is all of the Christian churches combined, not just the Seventh Adventist Church, but if he knew the ratio was 140 to 1, 140 to 1, why do we need 140 over here? Why? Because the believers that are living over here are not disciples. They're not disciples. That's why we need 140 over here. If we were actually practice discipleship over here, we'd have a lot more of these pastors we could be sending over here. Yeah, so really this is a call for every one of us to be more of a disciple. To go back to that biblical model and say, listen, if I'm a plumber, I need to be asking the question, how can I be a disciple in the context of my plumbing? If I'm a carpenter, how can I be a disciple in the context of being a disciple? If I'm a business person, a police officer, whatever it is that we're doing, the statement Jesus says is, as you go. As you go. That says, so as you go, make disciples. We use the term go and make disciples. Greek says as you go. It's an assumption that everybody is what? Going. It's an assumption that as you go to do your plumbing job, as you go to your office, as you go to the store to buy groceries, or as you go to the gas station to buy, you're making disciples. You're making disciples. And one of the things that I love, I do work for a mission organization, and we have this magazine, Adventist Frontiers. How many of you do not get this magazine every month? There's several of you. It's free. We've always given it free. And there's some on a table just outside these doors right there. I highly encourage you to pick up. There's several different copies. Pick up several copies. If you're not getting it at your house every month, please fill out there's a little place you can put your name, address. We'll send it to you. Just print clearly, and we'll send it to you. Every month it'll come to your door, right? Okay. So one of the reasons we send this out, we've never charged for it. Why? We want to encourage people to see all these missionaries in here, all of the stories. Some of them have schools. Some of them have little they do development work. Some of them do their missionary work. They have like a little clinic. Some of them, they don't have any of that. Some of them don't have like a music school. All the different types of work these people are doing. And discipleship is in the midst of that other task. Does that make sense? We would like for everybody here in the United States, as they read this, to realize, hey, look, there's a lot of ways to do discipleship. There's a lot of ways. You can do it through a school, through a clinic, through a music academy. There's a lot of ways to do development work. There's just friendship. There's a lot of ways of doing discipleship. We want you to know that. And to be asking yourself, hey, look, what could I be doing to also be more discipleship oriented in my daily life, with my neighbors, at the gas station? We can learn to ask more questions. I was at the gas station the other day, and I was talking to this guy, and I said, hey, how's your day going? Oh, he's doing fine. And I said, yeah, you just getting to work or just getting ready to get off? He says, oh, I'm just going to get off in just a few minutes. I'm pretty happy about that. I said, you got a wife and kids you're going home to? He says, well, no, she's not actually my wife. She keeps asking me to be, she wants us to get married over. She keeps asking, but we're not married right now. But he's got 3 kids. He says, I'm not sure, if I want to be committed. I said, you've got 3 kids and you're not sure if you want to be committed? And he stopped and thought about it for a minute. He didn't say anything. I said, you know what I would do if I were you? He says, what's that? I said, I'd go home and propose. Like, she's begging for that. And you've got these kids, they need it too. They need a dad, not just someone that may leave anytime. He started thinking about that. He said, I'll do it. I feel like there's a lot of opportunities we have to encourage people, but he doesn't need just to get married. He's needing someone to disciple him how to be a good husband and a good like he needs more help in that, right? And that's why we have if all of these people here were over here, then it'd be 1-to-1. Every one of us would have a neighbor we could work with, right? It'd be really easy. It'd be really easy. But one of our challenges is we have to get past the influence of these people to get to these people. Are you tracking with me? So many people that say they're Christians but aren't, when we want to talk to them about Jesus, they say, "Oh yeah, I knew a Christian once." Yeah, I know what you're talking about. We don't. We have to help these people too, right? To help them to understand. If you want to be a disciple of Jesus, this is what you're doing, right? This is what his teachings are. Here, I'll help you with that. Yeah. So I'm convinced that it's as we think in terms of what witnessing is like today. Younger people today, they talk about Generation X, and they have all these cool names for the modern generation. A lot of these young people have turned their backs on the church. They've turned their backs on the church because there's no discipleship going on. They said, look, if my only purpose in being a Christian is to come inside that building and sit down 1 3-hour session per week, so I'm simply not interested in that. I'm not interested in that. They're wanting a life that actually has meaning and purpose when they leave the church. They want to know, how does Christianity work out there? Like, that's what they want to know. And I've talked to them. They said, listen, the day we see the church actually changing the community, we're in. They've told me that. Not just one. The day we see the church in the community, changing the community, we're in. What they don't want is just to come in a building and sit down and wait for Jesus to come. That just seems like there's no purpose in that. People are actually crying. They're actually wanting discipleship. They're actually wanting someone to stand by their side and be the what? Master teacher. That model it for them. Yeah. Yeah. To be a true disciple who is an extension of the master teacher in the community. That's what they're looking for. That's what they're looking for. So I'm looking at the clock there. Can I tell you a couple of real short stories? Okay. I worked with this fellow. He was a young pastor. Decided to go work in the camps, the refugee camps in Thailand from refugees from Burma. So this is years ago. So he went over there working these camps. We had a couple of AFM missionaries working over there at the time. There was a boy there. He had been in this is actually, I'm lying to you. He was in Cambodia during this reign of chaos under Pol Pot. So during that horrific ordeal, there's a little boy there. He's watching people get killed. He's separated from his family, put in this little camp. He's forced to work in the rice fields. And he works day after day in these rice fields, and no food. They just give him a little bit of water with a few grains of rice in it. And he eats that little soup, and he's starving. He's just getting thinner and thinner every day. And he realizes, I'm going to die. And he's got a cousin over there. And his cousin looks at him and says, look, we're going to die if we stay here. He says, yeah, I know it. He says, we're going to have to leave. He says, yeah, but they're killing people everywhere. He says, we're going to have to hide. We'll have to be real careful. We'll have to hide. So these two little kids, they escaped one night and hid in the jungle. And they just kept hiding. Every day they'd go and hide. And there's landmines. I mean, people are getting blown up. There's all kinds of chaos taking place. They kept hiding and hiding. And one day they were on a little hill and they looked in. They could see the camp where people were doing, working the fields, doing rice. And they were just looking in there, trying to figure out, do we make ourselves visible and eat? Are we going to get killed? And somebody was working in the fields. A little girl was looking in the field and looked up there and realized that was her cousin. So she carefully kind of walks over there and lets him know, hey, look, I'm your cousin. And said, listen, come in here and help us work, but don't tell anybody your name and don't tell anybody that you're related to us. As long as they don't know we're related, you can work here. And they said, okay. So they came into the camp, and he discovered his mom and dad were in there. And he was just so happy. His mom and dad are in there. And they work in the camp. They have an uncle that's killed, and he starts learning all the people that have died, and he's okay. So he just acts like he doesn't know anybody, works in there, eventually escapes again, and goes to this refugee camp in Thailand. And some AFM missionaries are in there, and he learns about Jesus while he's in there. And then he's sent off to another country, and he meets a lady there, an American. They both got married and coming to America, and they had a little girl together. And that little girl grew up and said, listen, I want to serve Jesus too, and I want to go back to Cambodia, where I was from, and serve my people over there. So she did. She signed up with AFM. So like her dad, was a little boy in this refugee camp. And we've got AFM missionaries over there. He learns about Jesus. He ends up leaving, gets married, comes back. He's got a little girl, and she grows up. So I'm going to be a missionary, joins AFM, and just went back to Cambodia. What would happen if nobody had been in those refugee camps? You know what I'm saying? What would happen if nobody was in those refugee camps? We had a missionary working up in the CPIT. Was there for like six years or so. He left, and there was a little boy there. And the missionary said, listen, I know you're going to school. I'll help you out. So he went to high school, came back, and said, listen, I got to do something with my life. That guy was a missionary. Someone's got to be a missionary. There's a couple of tribes over there. He got in his canoe and paddled for days. Got up there to one of these other tribes and began talking to them about Jesus. And then he went to another tribe, began talking to them about. He raised up two groups in two different tribes. What would happen if that first missionary didn't go? And I can tell you story after story where missionaries go, and then it starts off. We had a young lady. She went as a student missionary by herself. So there was a missionary couple there, and when she got there, they left. She's like, okay, now I'm by myself. A young lady. Another young lady was there. Two student missionaries, both of them female. And so AFM has to ask the question: do we leave two young female ladies there by themselves? Like, do we bring them back? Do we send them to another project? What do we do with those two ladies? They left them there. Both of them eventually became career missionaries. One of them married locally, and her husband and her started an orphanage. They got an orphanage there, plus they're doing a church plant. They started a church in that I forget the name of that little town there. And that church went out and started 4 other churches. And one of those other churches went out and started another church. It's still growing. What would happen if that first missionary didn't go? And I could tell you story after story the same way. But why are they growing? Because of discipleship. That people are actually saying, look, this is not just what Christ said, this is how he lived, right? Yeah, so you're getting that picture. And by the way, it's not just a matter of what does it take to be saved. We're not talking about just what does it take to be saved. We're talking about how can we be disciples of Jesus. Like, that's what we're talking about. Would you be interested in being a disciple of Jesus? Like, that's the question. I think we've lost that. We've lost that appeal to be what? Disciples of Jesus. We need to get that appeal back and begin asking people, would you be interested in being a disciple of Jesus? And this is what it looks like. And as I wrap up this morning, I've barely got started on my notes, but I want to say this. I believe the world is desperate for disciples of Jesus. I really believe that. And And I just want to encourage everybody here to ask yourself, are you currently a disciple? Are you currently a disciple? And if you're not, I want to make an appeal that you would be a disciple. That you would tell Jesus, listen, I never really thought of myself as being a disciple, but your commission said to go and make disciples. And not just make disciples, but make disciples of all nations. And the gospel is going to be preached and being a witness, that culmination to all the world. And then the answer comes. That means that you're going to have disciple-making disciples all the way until the very end. That means that's us. We're those people right there. That Christ wants us to be what? Disciple-making disciples. Like that's His appeal. I want to encourage each of us to really think seriously about that. Am I currently a disciple? And am I a disciple-making disciple? Like, do I actually do what Christ asked me to do? Am I doing that? And if you're not, I just want to encourage you to take that step. Just have that word of prayer and say, look, Lord, I realize I missed something. I didn't understand. But now as I'm understanding, I want to actually be that person that you want me. I want to be a disciple. And I'm just asking you, give me the wisdom, Lord, to know how to do that as I go. Like Jesus said, as you go, make disciples. So as I go, how do I do that? And the beautiful thing is that Christ said, look, lo, I am with you. Oh, like He's willing to help you, to be there with you, and to continue helping you to be a disciple. He's willing to help you with that. That was the promise. That's why He's there. That's why He said that. Otherwise, He could have said, lo, I am with you always, and been done with it. But He didn't. He said, lo, I am with you always, even to the end. So we know today He's still willing to what? Coach us along. He's still willing to coach us along. If he didn't mean that, He wouldn't have said it. But He said it for a reason. If you're interested in supporting some of our missionaries that we have working with this group of people, I highly encourage it. You know, if you want to be one of these people that go over there, hey, I highly encourage that too. You know, and I see some of you that qualify as being student missionaries either now or shortly in the future. I would encourage that. Yeah, and career missionaries too. And but if you're not going to do either one of those, or even if you do either one of those, we need disciples here, like so bad. Let's pray. Dear God in the heavens, and Jesus, our master teacher, I don't know what was going through your mind, Jesus, when you gave that great commission and you added the words, and though I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. Or when you said, this gospel of the kingdom shall be a living witness, or being a witness into all nations. Lord, I just have to know that way back then you knew that was going to take time. A lot of time. It'd be really easy for, in the case of Aristotle and Socrates, for Socrates to be a master teacher and his disciples get different messages from him and get confused, end up having the schools that challenge each other, you know, and contradicted each other. How many churches today contradict each other? They've lost your original message, Lord. Even though Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John agree, churches today disagree. And I pray, Lord God, that you, Jesus, that you help us to, you be here with us to guide us into truth and help us to stay focused on the things that are really important. And that we'd give that living witness, being a witness, that we would offer that to the world. And that we would do all we can, Lord, to prepare other people for your return. I invite your presence here in this building, in the lives of everybody here, and just trust, Lord, that you continue to walk with us from this point forward until all the nations are ready for your return, for Christ's sake.